My name is Richard. I'm 62 years old. I had a friend. I didn't know the last time I spoke to him would be the last time he could still speak back. When the doctor told us he had only a few weeks left, my first thought wasn't shock. It was confusion. Because my friend had everything: money, influence, security, the kind of life people work themselves sick trying to achieve. And yet, there he was, 60 years old, lying in a hospital bed. His body exhausted, his mind painfully awake. The disease wasn't genetic, it wasn't sudden, it was stress, years of it. And as I sat there listening to machines breathe for him, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just his story, it was a warning. I met him over 30 years ago. Let's call him Daniel. Daniel was the kind of man people admired quietly and envied privately. Disciplined, driven, always in control. He used to say, "If I just push hard now, I can relax later." That sentence followed him his entire life. He came from nothing, watched his parents struggle, watched money arguments poison love. So he decided early, I will never be poor, and my family will never suffer like that. And to be fair, he succeeded. But success has a way of charging interest we don't notice until the bill arrives. I watched Daniel change slowly, not in a dramatic way, not the kind of change people notice all at once, in a way that looked responsible. At first, it was small things. He stopped coming around as much, missed a hangout here and there. "Just this week," he'd say, "work's crazy right now." Then it was birthdays, then dinners, then entire months where we didn't talk at all. And every time there was a reason that sounded reasonable, a deadline, a project, a promotion. Always work, always just this once. That's the dangerous part about slow loss. It doesn't feel like loss while it's happening. It feels like sacrifice, like discipline, like adulthood. Daniel married a wonderful woman, let's call her Maria, patient, loyal, quietly strong. In the beginning, she waited up for him, left food warm on the stove. Sometimes she'd fall asleep on the couch. At first, Daniel felt guilty. Later, the apologies stopped. Absence slowly becomes normal. Maria stopped waiting up. Love has a way of doing that. It stretches, it adjusts, it survives longer than we expect. But adaptation isn't the same as closeness. They had kids, bright kids, curious. Daniel loved them. But love, when you're not present, turns abstract. It becomes intention instead of action. He missed school events, plays, games, always because he was busy, always doing this for them. But children don't measure love in income. They measure it in presence. They remember who showed up. I'd visit their house sometimes. It was beautiful, spotless, and yet it felt quiet, empty quiet. The kids were polite, respectful, well-mannered, but not close. Politeness is what replaces intimacy. They didn't run to him. They treated him like someone important and distant. He wore stress like a badge of honor. Headaches, normal. Chest pain, stress, fatigue, weakness. Doctors warned him. I warned him. They talked about blood pressure, about slowing down. "Once things settle down," he'd say. That phrase followed him everywhere. It became his answer to everything. But life doesn't settle. It just keeps asking for more until you say no. And Daniel never did. Because slowing down feels like failure when you've mistaken exhaustion for purpose. By the time he realized, stress had woven itself into his life. He didn't collapse. He faded. He believed there would always be time later. There wasn't. The call came early one morning, earlier than any call should. He had collapsed. No details, no explanations, just enough words to make my chest tighten. I remember standing still for a moment after the call ended, phone still in my hand, as if moving too quickly might make it real. When I walked into the hospital room, he looked smaller, not physically, spiritually. Like someone had taken the weight of his ambition, his urgency, his constant forward motion, and suddenly removed it. What was left felt fragile. Machines filled the silence with gentle sounds, not alarming, just constant. The doctor was gentle, too gentle. He spoke the way people do when they already know how the story ends. Words Daniel had ignored for years, finally arranging themselves into a sentence that couldn't be waved away. Then the word that didn't belong, weeks. It floats in the air like a mistake. Weeks is something you associate with other people. Not with the man who still had meetings scheduled, projects half finished. Daniel had always lived like time was expandable, like it could be borrowed against the future. Weeks made that lie impossible. Daniel didn't react the way I expected. No anger, no denial. He just went quiet, stared at the wall. Later, he whispered something I'll never forget. I thought I had more time. Like someone realizing they misunderstood the rules. Maria came every day, every single day. She arrived at the same time, sat in the same chair, held his hand the same way. But there was distance between them, not hostility, just space. Built slowly, layer by layer, over years of emotional absence. Distance doesn't always arrive as a fight. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wearing the mask of understanding. Their conversations were careful, doctors, schedules, safe subjects, as if opening the wrong door might release something too heavy. His children came to visit. They loved him. But love that isn't practiced becomes unfamiliar, like a language you once spoke. They didn't linger. They didn't know how. Daniel noticed. Pain you expect. Regret catches you off guard. At night, when the hospital quieted, when the world slowed down, Daniel talked. Not about work, about moments, small ones. He talked about a school play he planned to attend, but rescheduled for a meeting that he couldn't even remember now. I thought I was building something, he said once, but I kept building past the people. I used to hate boredom, he said. Now I'd give anything for it. Because boredom is where closeness lives, where familiarity grows. Daniel had optimized boredom out of his life, along with rest, along with presence. I provided everything, except myself. That sentence changed the room. Stress had taken more than his health. It had taken his chance to be fully known. One night he asked me, "Do you think they know I love them?" Love isn't remembered as intention. It's remembered as pattern. Daniel loved deeply, but he practiced love as sacrifice, not presence. And sacrifice becomes invisible. In the last days, his body slowed down. I kept treating rest like a reward, he said. I didn't know it was part of the work. Daniel didn't die afraid. He died aware of what he achieved and aware of what he postponed too long. He didn't ask for more money, he asked for time. Time doesn't negotiate, it just leaves the room quietly. The last thing he said to me was this: tell people not to wait. Daniel ended quietly. No dramatic moment, no final declaration, no sudden clarity that rearranged everything. Just a life stopping after years of postponement. That's the part people don't warn you about. Endings are rarely cinematic. They don't arrive with music or meaning attached. They arrive as paperwork, as rooms slowly emptying. At his funeral, people stood and spoke the way people always do. They talked about his discipline, his drive, how hard he worked. They weren't wrong, but the real lessons weren't spoken aloud. Some costs are only visible in hindsight. I carry those lessons now, not as guilt, as responsibility. I learned that stress doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It whispers in schedules packed too tight, in weekends promised and postponed. Stress doesn't show up as danger. It shows up as necessity. It convinces you that everything is urgent, that slowing down is irresponsible. And the longer you listen, the quieter your own needs become. I learned that love doesn't survive on intention. Love needs presence, not promises about the future, not sacrifices explained later. Presence. The kind that shows up even when you're tired. Presence is inefficient. That's why it's easy to abandon. I learned that later is the most dangerous word we use. Later gives you the illusion of control, but later is where life quietly disappears. This story isn't about fear. It's about awareness, about noticing direction before momentum decides for you. If you're watching this and you see yourself in Daniel, you're not doomed, you're early. That matters more than you think. Because being early means you still have choices, you still have time. Time to call them back. Time to sit down without needing a reason. One day someone may tell your story. They won't know your thoughts. They'll remember patterns, who showed up, who stayed, who listened. The question they'll answer won't be how busy you were. It will be whether your life felt available. You don't need a dramatic overhaul. You just need to notice what keeps getting postponed. Ordinary moments are the ones we underestimate most. They don't announce themselves as meaningful, but those are the moments people miss. Ordinary dinners, ordinary silence, ordinary togetherness. Daniel missed those, and knowing that changed how I live now. I let silence happen, not because I'm wiser, but because I've seen the cost. What am I postponing that I'll wish I hadn't? Then do one small thing differently. One call returned, one evening left open, one boundary held. Sometimes one adjustment is enough to change the ending. Thank you for listening. Share it with someone you care about, not as a warning, as a reminder. Because some things don't need to be said louder, they just need room. I don't have answers for you. I'm not sure anyone ever really does. What I have is awareness, and maybe that's enough. Because life doesn't usually change when something explodes, it changes when something finally lands. Most people expect transformation to feel dramatic, like a moment you'll recognize immediately, like a line you cross. But real change is quieter than that. It shows up as a thought you can't shake, a sentence that stays with you longer than it should, a feeling that asks you to slow down even when everything else is telling you to hurry. That's what this story is meant to be, not a warning. If parts of this felt familiar, if certain moments made you uncomfortable in a soft way, that's not a bad thing. That's recognition. And recognition is rare. It usually arrives late, after damage, after distance.